He used that to buy time for he and his men and the members of his canoe house to evacuate out of Bonny without any casualties on their part. Hi and welcome to my channel. So today our video is going to be about Jaja of Opobo, who was a slave turned like mad wealthy businessman who practically, should I say, outsmarted the British like colonizers at that time, who of course didn't like it. So they schemed to take him out of power and get rid of him. So the video is going to be like, I didn't want it to be too long, so I'm going to split the video into two parts. I'll post them like a few days after each other so that they'll be like broken up, so that you don't have to sit through like an extra long video. But I'm going to film them at the same time, of course, just not post them at the same time so it won't be like too long. Enjoy. Jaja of Opobo was born in Imo State in 1821. His actual like birth name is not known. His parents were not really known because in those days, if you were caught like and sold into slavery, your new master would give you a new name that he felt like fits you more. So they would get rid of your old identity and basically give you a new one. In the 1800s, the Europeans had of course invaded Nigeria, and then there were some like black slave traders, as Nigerians themselves, that would capture and sell off their own kinsmen to the Europeans in exchange for tobacco, in exchange for bullets, in exchange for like the money or the currency of that time, and in some cases mirrors too. We all know that. So shameful. And I think that was one of the worst things about this story. It was how the fellow Nigerians who were supposed to have your back basically would sell off their own people just for a little bit of profit. And it's kind of both an empowering and a disgraceful part of our history at the same time. In 1833, he was captured and sold to a wedding merchant in Bonny Island in Rivers State, who renamed him to Juboga. So at this point, we're going to have a little like take a little detour from this story, so I can explain some things in the background that you need to understand things later on and like keep up with everything that is going on and not get confused. Yeah, just bear with it a little bit. You need this backstory. Think of it like a filler episode in an anime. See, the Delta communities were very important then in the trade between the Europeans and the Americans with the Nigerians. They would take the imports from the European and American supercargos and bring that into Nigeria, and in exchange would bring back the palm oil produced and resell it to the Europeans and the Americans. Basically, they were the middlemen. They were important then to well into the 19th century. The Delta region in Nigeria is populated by swamps and rivers and things like that. So like a lot of waterways. So in those days, canoes especially were indispensable to trade. If you wanted to trade like in any single substantial way, you had to have a fleet of canoes. So due to that, the Delta region basically formed communities all revolving around what was known then as canoe houses. A canoe house was very similar to a modern day local government. It will consist of a merchant, his family, the numerous slaves that they owned too. A very successful and prosperous canoe house will comprise of thousands of members and hundreds of canoes. Now, the very fascinating thing about these canoe houses was that leadership was not transferred through like inheritance. It was basically a meritocracy. because of the stiff competition in those days, if you wanted to be the leader, or if you were going to be the leader, it didn't matter one bit if you were the child of the owner or if you were a slave. They did not care. As long as you were competent at what you did, you could rise to become the leader. The basic reasoning behind this was that because there were like several competing canoe houses, to stay at the top you had to have competent leaders at the top. If not, you would sink under. So it didn't matter who you were. Like that was like the basic their basic principle. They did not care one bit who you were, whether your father was a previous leader or not, or whether you were this one slave that they bought. That was none of their business. As long as you proved to be competent at your job, as long as you were smart, you were business savvy, you could rise to become the leader of a canoe house. Let's get back into the story. So the now named Jubo, of course, you know, he's the person who bought him named him Jubo Juboga. Jubo's first masters, whose name is not really clear, they thought he was too stubborn, like for a slave. So he sold him to his friend, the then chief of the Anapepu like Canoe House, which was owned by the royal family. Juba was like, he belonged to the lowest caste, like the lowest several caste. Why? Because he was a foreigner who was not born in Delta. You know, I said previously that he was born in Imo State, and Imo is like Igbo, like the Igbo people are the ones born in Imo State. So since he was sold to people like in the Delta region, he was obviously foreign, you know, the language, everything. So he belonged to the lowest several class just because of that. Because he was one of the lowest, like of the lowest among the slaves, he first of all started out as a paddler on his owner's canoe. But see, the thing is, it didn't take long before his like intelligence and business acumen was recognized, and he eventually climbed the levels and got to the he even got to like to a stage where he started dealing directly with the European supercargos, and his dealing directly with the European supercargos is what led to his name change to like Jaja, because the Europeans could not pronounce Jubo Juboga, so that's where the name Jaja comes from. At that time, Jaja was not involved with Bonny politics at that time, but Madu, that's the person who bought him from his previous owner, had died, and his son, Chief Alali, was now the chief of the Anapepo house. But in 1863, Alali died. And when Chief Alali died, it was discovered that he was in huge debt. He was terrible with money management, and the Anapepo house owed a huge debt between £10,000 to £15,000, which, adjusting for inflation nowadays, is around 1.2 million to 1.9 million, which was a huge amount of money. The thing is, he wasn't even owing it internally. No, he was owing it to the European supercargos. And because of this huge debt, none of the like eligible chiefs that were next in line wanted to step in to become the head, because if you become the head, you take on the debt. And eventually Jaja stepped in and became the head of the Anapepo house. Like I said earlier, Jaja was a very smart businessman, and previously he already had like a good relationship with both the European supercargos and the palm oil traders. So he leveraged that relationship, and in 2 years he had paid off the debts that they owed the European supercargos, and their canoe house was so prosperous that he even began absorbing some of the less prosperous canoe houses that surrounded them. That led to like a lot of fear, because nobody knew how he did it. Nobody could believe that he would be able to do that. And the surrounding like houses that he had not absorbed, they began to fear him and become jealous of him, that eventually he would take over their house too. Okojumbo, the head of the Manila house, was his main rival, and he began scheming like different ways to try to see if he could take Jaja out permanently and even gain control of his house. And unfortunately for Jaja, Okojubo's scheme worked. In 1868, Bonny was ravaged by a fire. The Anapebo house was the worst hit out of all the houses. Okojubo took advantage of this and intensified his efforts, trying to provoke Jaja into open conflict, and eventually his provocations worked and Jaja responded. By 1869, there had been serious conflict and fighting in between the two houses until suddenly Jaja sued for peace, which was a move that shocked everybody. So the peace talks were done under the arbitration of the British consul. But you see, the thing is, Jaja just used that as a ruse. He used that to buy time for he and his men and the members of his Canoe House to evacuate out of Bonny without any casualties on their parts, which was a freaking genius move at that time. So that's the end of part one of the Jaja of Opobo series. So just like anticipate second part in a few days. Bye.